Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming along today, as well as answering any questions that you might have for me later on. I wanted today to give a brief update on the work the Scottish Government has been doing in the wake of the EU referendum, with a reminder of why it matters so much to our economy and how we see that work progressing in the weeks and months ahead. Before I turn to that, though, let me take this opportunity, given that they're arriving home today, to formally congratulate Team GB on their record-breaking performance at the Rio Olympics. I think the whole team deserves thanks and congratulations for delivering such an outstanding spectacle of sporting success. Obviously, for Scotland, this was the best ever performance at an overseas Olympic Games, with Scottish athletes winning a fantastic 13 medals. Sports Scotland will be hosting an event to celebrate the success of our athletes that will take place at Heriot-Watt University at the end of September. This is probably therefore a good moment to confirm that the new National Sports Performance Centre, which is located at Heriot-Watt, backed by £24 million of Scottish Government funding and £9 million from the other funding partners, Sports Scotland, Edinburgh City Council and the university itself, will open to the public on time and on budget on the 29th of August. And that will be another world-class sporting facility that will benefit both our elite athletes but also our grassroots competitors. And another good example of encouraging people to get more active in their local clubs and communities is the development of community sports hubs across the country. And so I'm delighted that Sports Scotland has exceeded their original aim of creating 150 community sports hubs and will now invest a further £6 million to create a total of 200 community hubs by 2020. I have no doubt that the success of our athletes over these past few weeks and the investment in both elite and community sport will inspire the next generation to go on to Olympic success in the future. Let me now turn to the EU. A few weeks ago, I set out the 5 key national interests that I consider to be at risk as a result of the UK-wide referendum result: our democratic interest, our economic interest, our interest in social protection and in the solidarity of independent countries working together to address global challenges, and our interest in continuing to influence EU decisions. Today we've published the first in a series of impact assessments by the Office of the Chief Economic Advisor. Based on projections by a number of external organisations, it estimates that by 2030, the cost of the Scottish economy of leaving the EU could range from £1.7 to £11.2 billion a year. And the estimated cost to our public finances ranges from £1.7 billion to £3.7 billion a year. And what today's publication illustrates is that whatever the final form of Brexit, whatever Brexit means Brexit turns out to actually mean in practice, the old argument that the UK somehow delivers financial security for Scotland no longer holds water. Brexit will be deeply damaging to Scotland's economy and to our finances. And this assessment also underlines the importance of doing everything we can to protect our place in Europe and especially our membership of the single market. I said on the morning after the referendum that we would pursue all options, including the option of independence, to achieve this, and that remains the case. In the first instance, that means playing a full and active part in the development of the UK position in advance of Article 50 being triggered. It's through that process, first of all, that we must make sure that Scotland's interests are recognised and protected. We have a welcome commitment, and it is welcome from the Prime Minister, that the Scottish Government will be fully involved in that process and that Article 50 will not be triggered until there is a UK approach and objectives for negotiation. Over recent weeks, my officials have been working closely with the UK Government and the other devolved administrations to develop the detailed mechanisms that will turn this commitment into reality. The key priority for the Scottish Government in these discussions has been to ensure that it is a meaningful process that involves us directly in shaping the UK position so that it reflects and protects our interests, including through outcomes that might differ from the position in the rest of the UK. These discussions are making progress and we expect them to conclude soon and ministers to meet in the near future to finalise these arrangements. The Scottish Government will then work through these arrangements to seek ways to protect Scotland's interests. Our approach will be as follows. We will firstly and obviously use whatever influence we have in this process to seek the least worst outcome for the whole of the UK. That, in my opinion, at this stage, should involve a very close ongoing relationship with the EU, including continued membership of the single market. However, given the strong signals that the UK is heading for a hard Brexit, a future outside the single market as well as outside the EU, we shouldn't underestimate the prospects of the UK approach being at the more damaging end of the spectrum. And as we show today, the option of hard Brexit, in which the UK would fall back in WTO rules, the option that some in the UK government appear to favour, would see Scotland's economy take a hit of up to £11.2 billion a year and reduce our public finances by up to £3.7 billion a year. That would be the worst possible outcome, yet right now it appears to be the UK's favoured one. It's therefore inevitable that our input into the development of the UK position will focus heavily on proposing distinctive arrangements designed to protect as best we can Scotland's relationship with the EU and the single market. While we can't be definitive until we've got more clarity about precisely the relationship that the UK is seeking to achieve with the EU, our Standing Council of Experts is already working on a range of broad options. The Council will meet again next week to discuss the progress of that work. Of course, as I've said before, if it turns out simply not to be possible to protect Scotland's interests through the UK, it must be open to the Scottish people to consider afresh, and in this very different context, the question of independence. However, I am very clear that we will enter these UK discussions in good faith. Indeed, the work to ensure that Scotland's interests are protected in the pre-Article 50 process and in the negotiations that follow will be, I expect, very intensive in the months ahead. And given the vital importance of that work, I intend to ensure that it has the priority it merits, while also allowing ministers to focus fully on our other responsibilities. So over the next few days, I'll confirm details of 2 steps to equip the Scottish Government for the task that lies ahead. Firstly, I intend to seek Parliament's approval on our return from summer recess for the appointment of a new minister reporting directly to me, who will lead for the Scottish Government in our engagement with the UK Government in the pre-Article 50 period and beyond. It will also be the job of the new minister to ensure that the voice of Scottish stakeholders is heard very loudly and directly by the UK Government as it develops its position. Fiona Hislop and Alistair Allen will continue to be responsible for our engagement with EU institutions and member states, and Derek Mackay will remain responsible for overall policy on the Constitution. I'll also convene a new Cabinet subcommittee which will bring relevant ministers together to oversee and direct all of our work on Brexit-related matters. Finally, while the job of finding the best way through the situation created by the EU referendum will be a lengthy and a challenging one, it's essential that action is taken now to support the economy. I announced an economic stimulus package 2 weeks ago. We'll set out more detail of this investment in the next couple of weeks. So far, however, we have heard absolutely nothing from the UK Government about supporting the economy. And as economic warnings mount, including news yesterday of a steep decline in capital investment in the UK, the deafening silence from the Prime Minister and the Chancellor is becoming increasingly negligent. It is, in my view, time for the UK Government to wake up and get on with the job. There must be an economic stimulus plan, not months from now in the autumn statement, but immediately. And I repeat my call today for such a plan to be announced without any further delay. So with those comments, I'm happy now to take questions on the areas I've covered, as well as any other issues that are of interest to you. Colin.
With the GERS figures due out tomorrow and expected to show that we're further in the red, are you just trying to get your retaliation in first with this today?
No, this is the first in a series of impact assessments that the Scottish Government will publish. I think it would be strange if the Scottish Government wasn't analysing the impact on the economy generally, but across a range of different sectors and indeed a range of different areas of society, as well as the economy of the of a move to leave the European Union. So this is the first in what will be a series of publications. On GERS, obviously, I, like you, haven't yet seen the GERS publication. I'll see that tomorrow morning. I don't think there'll be any surprises in GERS tomorrow. I don't think it's going to tell us anything that we don't already know. With the low oil price, Scotland faces a challenge to diversify and grow our onshore economy. That's something that we have known and continue to focus on. So tomorrow's publication is not going to change that. What it has changed from the last GERS publication, of course, is the context, the fact that we now face the prospect of being taken out of the European Union. And what the publication today shows very clearly, that if we are removed from the European Union, that challenge gets harder and the situation gets worse. So Scotland faces a choice. Do we allow that situation to become harder by being taken out of the European Union, or do we seek ways of protecting our European Union membership so that we can continue within that context to face up to that challenge? What I think the Brexit vote absolutely means is that the argument that some have used in the past when GERS has been published, that the UK is somehow a safe harbour for Scotland, is no longer true. Severin.
First Minister, you've just used a similar phrase talking about the UK no longer offers a safe harbour and that the UK no longer offers financial security. You said that argument no longer holds water, but GERS is expected to confirm tomorrow you've got a £15 billion structural deficit, which is being funded by the UK. So regardless of whether Brexit impacts on the long run on the UK and Scottish economy's potential future envelope or whatever else, you are still being protected in your spending by UK taxpayers.
Well,
as of now.
Obviously, I'll talk more about GERS tomorrow, and we'll no doubt meet some of you again tomorrow morning when we can talk specifically about this. I won't labour the points about GERS. There's a number of caveats, obviously, that you have to attach to the GERS publication. It is not a statement of an independent Scotland's opening position, because that would be influenced by a whole range of things like defence spending, negotiations around debt interest that would affect that. So, I think that's one caveat. It's also a statement of Scotland's economy under the status quo, not a projection for how the Scottish economy would perform with independence. But nevertheless, I said a moment ago in response to Colin, GERS will not tell us anything we don't know, that Scotland has a challenge to face in growing our economy, diversifying our economy, and that's a challenge that we recognise and are working to address. Brexit makes that challenge much, much harder. I don't think there is anybody can deny that in any way, shape or form. So Scotland's got a choice.
But you said it doesn't provide a cushion.
Of course it doesn't.
Providing you £15 billion.
Look, I've just published analysis that shows the hit to the Scottish economy as a result of Brexit could be as much as £11 billion. This is about how we choose to face up to and address a challenge that's not unique to Scotland, about how we get our economy out of deficit, because of course the UK as a whole is also in deficit. So that's the choice that opens up for the people of Scotland, and one that we'll be discussing for, I'm sure, much time to come. I'll take Hamish.
First Minister, you talked about the preparations that have been put in place to protect Scotland's interests in the event of Brexit. One of the things you talked about right at the start was getting people to prepare for legislation, which might be needed to push through a second independence referendum. They've had 2 months now to do that. Can you tell us how far they've got with the preparation of that legislation? Is it ready to be presented to Parliament if it's necessary?
That work is underway. I will deliver my programme for government statement to the Scottish Parliament. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody 2 weeks today, I think that is, or thereabouts. So I'll say more about that there. As you know, I have to discuss legislative proposals with Parliament first. But that work is underway and is progressing. Andy.
These series of papers you're preparing, will any of them look at the impact on the economy of disengaging from the UK economy rather than the EU?
Well, throughout all of the options we are looking at in terms of protecting Scotland's place in the EU, for me, whichever one you're looking at, part and parcel of that is about ensuring that we have free trade and open borders across the rest of the UK. So this idea that people put forward is that you choose EU trade over UK trade or vice versa, I think is a false choice. And while I don't underestimate the challenges involved in all of this, challenges from a situation we haven't asked to be in, which is facing the prospect of EU exit. Nevertheless, we have a UK government right now that is at pains to try to reassure people in Ireland about, notwithstanding the Brexit vote, there will not be a hindrance to free movement and free trade with Ireland. So clearly the UK government doesn't itself think that these issues are insurmountable. But I do not want to see a situation where our ability to trade with or to travel freely within the UK is compromised. I didn't want that when we were in the last independence referendum, and I wouldn't want it if we were ever to be considering that issue again. Peter.
Just picking up on that, you say you think it's more likely there's going to be what you call a hard Brexit. If there is a hard Brexit, or even a hard Brexit.
Have you had breakfast, Peter? Are you thinking about, is your tummy rumbling?
If there is a hard Brexit and Scotland manages somehow to secure its place within the EU, there must therefore have to be a hard border. It can't be any other way.
Well, if that's the case, then why do we have a Prime Minister that is saying that she will not allow a hard border between the north of Ireland and the Republic of Ireland? Now, what I'm saying, I'm not standing here saying right now that all of these issues have been worked out. We're in a process of, firstly waiting to see exactly what the UK is seeking to achieve, let alone what it's going to be able to achieve, and then seeking to protect Scotland's position within that. But I think it's reasonable to say in the context and in light of what has been said in relation to Ireland, to say that it cannot simply be seen as inevitable that if Scotland manages to protect its place in the EU, then the kind of situation that you've just talked about arises. We're in unprecedented times, and we need to find unprecedented solutions to protect our best interests, and that's what I've always said we will seek to do. Yes.
Striking that the Scottish Government paper today is based in large part on work done by the UK Treasury and by the NIESR. Do you think that those, if those institutions give analysis on the economic prospects of an independent Scotland, that we should give equal weight to them on that topic?
Look, I'm sure you will give weight, as you did in the last referendum, to all of these kind of reports that are published by organisations like that. So, what the OSHA paper has done today is take the published information that exists about the projections for the UK economy and made its assessments about the knock-on projections for the Scottish economy. I think that's a reasonable thing to do. And obviously we'll see what the reality turns out to be. But, I hear I've seen some politicians in a Scottish context today quibble with some of these projections. Before the EU referendum, of course, they were sort of waving them about as the gospel truth. The fact of the matter is, I don't know anybody, perhaps apart from folk like Boris Johnson, I don't know anybody that seriously said Brexit is not going to have a seriously bad impact on our economy. It's not a question of if, it's a question of how much. And, that's the point I'm making. Those who have previously argued that the UK somehow gives financial security and certainty to Scotland, that argument is bust, frankly. We know that Brexit, if we don't find a way of protecting our relationship with the EU, and in particular with our membership of the single market, then Brexit will deliver a significant hit to our economy and to our public finances, and that is the reality. Yes, Nick.
A month before the EU referendum, you said Treasury figures on the impact of Brexit were overblown. And are these based on different calculations? And if so, what are they?
Well, the Treasury information that's in the paper published today is the material the Treasury published. As you will see in that paper, it has a range of different external organisations, and the Treasury is certainly at the upper end of that. What we're doing is taking the published information and using that to project an assessment for the Scottish economy. Obviously, as First Minister, I'll be doing everything I can to try to prove some of those predictions wrong. I don't want to see an impact like that on the economy. So both through the work we're doing around trying to protect our place in Europe, but also the wider work such as the economic stimulus plan, we'll be trying to prove these projections wrong and mitigate the impact. But I don't think anybody can credibly say that there's not going to be an impact on our economy, a serious impact on our economy, if we end up being taken out of Europe.
But does it mean
yes.
that the top end of that figure based on the Treasury stuff is overblown?
We've put out a range of different assessments and taken the Scottish impact of those assessments. I hope that they're all overblown, but we have to be realistic about the situation we find ourselves in. Jamie.
It's possible you could call for a referendum before Article 50 is triggered to effect only
Well, I think we have to see what position the UK is seeking to achieve, because then that it gives us the clarity around what the alternative to independence would be. Obviously, there is a lot of uncertainty just now about when Article 50 is going to be triggered. The official position is not before the end of this year. Increasingly, though, we're seeing speculation that it may be quite far into next year. And I guess, and it is a guess, that we will reach a certain point, or the UK government will reach a certain point next year where, if it's not triggered, it would be difficult to trigger it in advance of the German and French elections, which may take it further into next year. But that, of course, is all speculation at this stage. I frankly find it incredible that, weeks on from the outcome of the referendum, we still have absolutely no more clarity on what Brexit actually means than we did on referendum day. But that clarity is important for us to then judge and assess the different alternative options for Scotland. Tom.
Probably First Minister, the morning after the votes, you said in the second independence referendum seemed highly likely. Now that 2 months have elapsed, is that still your belief?
Yes.
And if so, what sort of time frame have you got in mind?
Well, I'm not going to set a time frame right now when the time frame for the work we've just been talking about around Article 50 at the UK end is so uncertain. It would be, I think, a foolish thing for me to do that. But while I am absolutely serious here about trying to examine and exhaust all options, I recognise the morning after the referendum that it may be impossible to protect Scotland's interests within the UK context. It doesn't mean I'm not going to try. If we get to that position, and what I said the morning after the referendum I stick to, that I think that's highly likely, then it will be for me to put that proposition to the Scottish Parliament, and for the Scottish Parliament to make its decision, and ultimately for the people of Scotland to make its decision. Yes?
Sorry, just going back to the point about use of Treasury figures, you were very critical of so-called Project Fear during the EU referendum campaign in using certain figures. For example, the Treasury came up with 4.5 billion cost to the Scottish economy, and I think it was 250,000 jobs could be lost by 2080. So why are you publishing this analysis now and not as opposed to during the actual campaign when it could have influenced the vote?
What we've published today is based on all of the published information by a range of external organisations. Now, I just flip it back to you here. If we published this report today where we had omitted the Treasury publication but had all the other ones and didn't have the Treasury, you would no doubt be asking me why we've not listened to or included the Treasury. So, I think it's a fair and reasonable thing to do when we're making projections based on these assessments that have been done, that we include the full spectrum of them. Right, any final questions, Alan?
I can change the topic if that's okay, First Minister. We've seen lots of stories in recent days about budget problems in Police Scotland, and there's stories today in papers about 300 redundancies, and in Edinburgh, the number of officers have been cut in half over the past 5 years. Is the single force not now in crisis, and what is the government doing about that?
Well, no, I don't think the single force is in crisis, but we work with the police and with the Scottish Police Authority to make sure that we've got policing in this country that is appropriate to the needs of the country. Interesting, you've used the same terminology in your question to me that I think your paper used this morning about the risk of 300 police officers being made redundant. Police officers in Scotland are office holders. Their terms and conditions are set out in statute. Police constables cannot be made redundant in Scotland. That's the legal position. So this idea that there is a threat of redundancy to police is not true. We have, of course, protected police numbers at 1,000 above the number we inherited, and the Justice Secretary very recently has made it clear to the Chief Constable that that's the position we expect them to maintain. So, like all parts of the public sector just now, of course there are challenges around public spending, and we work with public authorities to make sure these challenges are being handled appropriately and being handled in a way that protects frontline services, and that will continue to be the position with the police as well. Right, any final questions before we...
I suppose the obvious one, are you going to tell us who this Brexit minister is?
I am, not right now, but yes, at some point soon I will, yes.
And when you're rethinking about the shape of your cabinet, I also wonder whether you'll start to rethink the position on PLOs and whether each cabinet secretary ought to have to take a deal on a scrutiny committee.
The position on PLOs and committees is a long-standing one. I don't accept this suggestion of a conflict of interest that has been made. That said, I have received correspondence from a range of different opposition interests within the Parliament. I'm considering that correspondence and I will respond in due course. Okay, Jamie, one last final one then.
Can I just ask what you think about Tesco removing the salt tire from
Do you know, I'm standing here thinking, I can't believe I've got through this without anybody asking me about flags on punnets of strawberries. You can tell it's August. When with everything else that's going on in the world, I'm being asked about flags on punnets of strawberries. I'm very proud of the salt tire. I tend not to make my purchasing decisions in Tesco on the basis of the flags that are on the packaging. But there is, of course, there's a serious point here in terms of origin of produce, and the salt tire and Scottish produced goods is an important marketing tool for us. Perhaps we should reflect and wonder what the response might be if this story was in reverse, where the Union Jack was being removed from packaging because of complaints in Scotland. So hopefully, in whatever way this happens, common sense will prevail and we can all be happy and all eat our strawberries from Scotland. Actually, strawberries from Scotland are just the best strawberries. That's why you should eat them, not because of the flag that happens to be on their packaging. Thank you all very much.